So many people think, well, what can I take instead of medication for my hypertension? So you just want to change one pill for the other? That's not the answer. What can I take instead of my thyroid medication? That's not the answer. Welcome to today's episode of The Medical Disruptor, the show where we challenge outdated medical norms and redefine what true wellness looks like. I am bringing you the innovators, the boundary breakers, and the trailblazers who refuse to accept the status quo. These disruptors are revolutionizing the way we approach health and wellness. On today's episode, we have Sachin Patel, who is convinced that the doctor of the future is the patient. And he has committed himself to helping others raise their consciousness, activate their inner doctor, and initiate their deepest healing through the use of lifestyle and breathwork. Who knew that you take in more pounds of air than you take in of food? Yet we talk about food so much more than we do our air. Now, in this podcast, let's dive in. Sachin Patel, I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you so much for coming.
Dr. E, it's my absolute pleasure. I'm so excited for our conversation today.
Likewise. So, we spoke a little bit before the camera started rolling, and I'm really excited about your story because you are like, the ultimate provider. Like many of our providers, myself included, we had a moment, we did one thing and then we turned. And then for you, it's like this natural curiosity and a desire to help your patients that drives you. And I love that. So tell us a little bit about your background and then how you went off the deep end and came into the vortex.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my journey starts off as first becoming a chiropractor. And, growing up, I had a very firm kind of innate belief that the body can heal itself. Wasn't one to take drugs or medications and really appreciated and was fascinated with our bodies. In undergrad, I did my studies in kinesiology. So we study the
Mm,
physics and biomechanics of movement. That turned into a degree in chiropractic. And then a couple of years into chiropractic school, or after graduating from chiropractic school, I was working with elite athletes, Olympians, marathon runners, professional athletes, and really working with a lot of soft tissue injuries. That landed me on the news in a good
mm.
way. And we helped a lady, Connie, get rid of some chronic elbow
The
issues
good
that
way.
she
I
was
like that you
having.
said that.
Yeah. And then, our office was flooded with new patients. And so we went from seeing some of the quote unquote healthiest people in our community to seeing some of the unhealthiest people in our community, not through their own fault, but just because nobody could help them.
Yeah.
So we went from seeing athletes to people coming in with walkers and wheelchairs. And I'm like, what gives? Like, why are these people coming in? Because the story didn't talk about, these type of chronic conditions. So
Fascinating.
people started coming in with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, autoimmune conditions, skin issues, like things that I didn't have any training to help. But around the same time, I started getting emails of case studies from a Dr. Ron Grisanti, who was the founder of Functional Medicine University.
Sure.
And so I started looking at the case studies and I'm like, oh my God, these are like the people that are coming in to see me that I don't have answers for. And more importantly, not only did I not have answers for them, but I didn't know where to send them because they'd already seen everyone, tried everything, taken every drug, had every scan, had every lab work done, and nobody could help them. And so that's when I started training in functional medicine just to see what I could do to help people like these. And as I went through the training, there's a form that they give you, and it's a nutritional assessment questionnaire
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah.
that was developed by Dr. Dickon Weatherby. And so he hands me so I started printing out the form and handing it to my elite athletes and my traditional chiropractic patients. And I started realizing that while they loved me and loved coming in and they always felt better when they left and they got better and would come back when they re-injured themselves, I was never asking them all these other questions related to global health. And they were never bringing it up because they had reduced me down to, somebody who's just working on their soft tissue and joint issues.
Oh my God. I just want to interrupt you for a second. I think that is such a great point. I want to surface that for a minute because it's so interesting. Because, the reason I want to surface this for a second is because on the one hand, we always talk about in traditional medicine, conventional medicine, I still practice my primary care practice. We are taught as providers to really focus in on the one problem. Like, no, 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 no. I don't care what happened 5 years ago. I just want to know right now, right here. Oh, okay. Well, I have this cough. Okay, great. So we'll just talk about your cough. But by the way, my stomach also hurts. I don't care. You're here for the cough, right? But it's interesting because what you're describing also is our patients have also been trained to do this. So they are trained to come to you for one body part or one issue. Why would they talk to you about nutrition? Because patients also don't know that things are connected. I talk about this a lot because I'm focused so much on providers and why isn't the doctor doing this and why, but we've also have this expectation from the public. So they never thought that my shoulder hurts. Why would I tell you that I also eat Cheetos all day long, right? So I love that so much that you discovered this accidentally. So you started doing the nutritional assessment, and then what happened?
Yep. So I started doing the nutritional assessment questionnaire. And, my boss at the time, I was working as an associate, wasn't into nutrition and supplements and all that stuff. She was very like focused on soft tissue. And so I eventually left that practice. It wasn't the right fit for me anymore and started practicing more chiropractic and functional medicine. And then eventually started my own practice. And, functional medicine, as you probably know, as our listeners probably know, is something that can get complicated very fast. And every week,
Unnecessarily.
yeah. And every week it seems like there's a new test or a new supplement or a new protocol. And so, our practice reached kind of peak complexity probably like 5 or 6 years ago. And we realized that our average client wasn't even doing the most basic things.
Yes.
So I decided to, strip things back and go back to the basics, go back to the foundation. And we started getting amazing results as a result of that. So
I-
people started losing weight, their energy improved, their mood improved, their digestion improved, just by tapping into what I'd always known as a chiropractor, the body's innate wisdom and removing interference. And today, interference looks like toxins. It looks like poor lighting. It looks like a lack of connection with nature. It looks like going to bed too late, right? Being on your phone too
yeah.
long. So removing that interference and giving the body more of what it needs created amazing outcomes. And the cool thing
Amazing
about
outcome.
that is that
I,
there's
I,
no
I
and
love this
happens
so much
quick.
because I would say, tell me if you agree with this, that the provider that is just starting in functional medicine relies heavily on testing, a lot of supplements, very complicated stuff. Myself
Yeah.
included, I couldn't see someone if I didn't have all these tests in place. And I would say it's almost like if you're going to, if people ask me, how do I know if I'm a good provider? Probably if they don't test you for a long time. As you get better, please tell me if you agree. I feel like if you just spend time listening to the story, you, I'm not that I never use tests, but I use tests very much later on after the basics are put in place.
Mhm.
And then if the basics are put in place and then we hit a wall, then we also know what to test for. But what were you going to test for mold and you're still eating, I don't know, Cheetos is the thing I'm going to say today. Cheetos. So I love that you said we reached peak complexity and went to basics. And I think that is the journey of functional medicine providers as you
Mhm.
become more confident, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's like it really boils down to also trusting your intuition and asking the right questions, right? And really listening intentfully and deeply to the person that's sitting in front of you. Because we learned this in school, I'm sure you did as well, is that if you listen carefully, the client's going to tell you 90% of what you need to know.
It's not
And
100%.
if you understand how chronic disease works, you can identify patterns in their environment and lifestyle and even the language and the way they speak and communicate and in their relationships. Like you can very quickly identify what the problem is. And the other thing too, that I think a lot of people need to recognize is that I feel that the things that matter the most, that move the needle the most when it comes to health, there's no lab work for. So there's no lab work for what time you went to bed. There's no lab work for do you
Amen.
love your job? There's no lab work for did you get outside and get some sunlight today? There's no lab work for, do you go to bed, with an empty stomach? What we see in the labs is the downstream effect of not doing those things consistently. But you can just survey your client and identify where the opportunities are. And most of those opportunities are absolutely free and don't require any testing and don't even require any expensive interventions.
Oh my God, so true. Is this why you say the doctor of the future is the patient?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know,
Say
the,
more.
so when you understand the magnitude of our healthcare crisis and the way the system is set up, you have to get really sick in order to then be told what to do to get healthy, right? And to me, that doesn't really make sense because imagine we ran our finances that way. I mean, some
Okay.
some people some people do.
Some people do.
Imagine we ran our marriages that way, and again, some people do, right? And it usually ends in disaster. So instead of a disease prevention model, what we subscribe to is a health creation model. And when you understand the patient themselves is the person who created this problem and owns the very body and environment that's going to heal themselves. I mean, I can't doctor them better than they can doctor themselves. Right. And so, really, when we understand how big the problem is, it's not going to be people getting sick and then seeing more holistic healthcare practitioners. We don't need more holistic healthcare practitioners, in my opinion. Certainly, we need them, but what we need is more people being self actualized and self realized and self aware. Because the other thing, too, is that even if I had a magic bullet, so if somebody came to me, Dr. Ian, and they said, "What's the magic bullet that can fix me?" And I gave them that magic bullet and I didn't change any of their behaviors, then I'm sending them home with a message that I can take this pill, not
Oh,
change my behaviors, and everything's going to be okay. But for me, the problem with somebody who comes in who has a toxic environment, lifestyle, language, relationships, all that, and behaviors and all that stuff is that they're modeling that to their children. So their children end up in the same position. And if you survey parents, at least good ones, they don't want their kids to have the same illnesses that they do. But guess what? They're feeding their kids the same food. They're modeling those same behaviors, and eventually their kids are going to end up in the same place. So we focus on a health creation. We focus on you doctoring yourself because I believe that's the only solution to our healthcare crisis.
oh my God. Yeah. You said so many amazing things here. First, there's something I talk about all the time, which is like, huh, if you're in primary care, there's nothing to do for you until you have the ICD-10 code, right? Like, until you have a disease, there's nothing to do for you. And in fact, what do they tell you? You're fine. Let's do wait and see. If things get worse, come back. If things get worse, come back.
Hmm.
And that's because, not because they don't care. They're lovely people. They don't have tools. Their tools start at diagnosis. And so, and to your point, once the medications are, they don't actually create health or wellness. That's my new word for the day. They create absence or controlling of disease, which is not the same as health. Which I know you know this, but I just like to surface that. And I also love what you said about this magic pills. So many people think, well, what can I take instead of medication for my hypertension? So you just want to change one pill for the other. That's not the answer. What can I take instead of my thyroid medication? That's not the answer. That's such a, this idea of changing one for the other. That is not it at all, right? It's doing all this work. I was so agree with you. And then this piece about the kids really, really got to me because we also see pediatrics in our primary care now in a functional. And a lot of times we have so many obese children who come through. So obviously it's a problem in this country. And I will bring it to the parents like, hey, the BMI is a little high. What should we do about it? And it'll be like an 8-year-old, 9-year-old kid. And then the mom or dad will turn to the child and say, you see, I told you. And I say to them, mom and dad, this 8-year-old doesn't have a car or a job. Where are they getting the food from? And mom and dad inevitably has like a, bit of a, they look like a metabolic syndrome kind of patient. And they're on 2 or 3 medications for diabetes, but they've associated that with their age.
Mm.
They haven't associated with the fact that they're buying Oreos for the whole family. And then they turn to this kid's like, well, I told you not to snack. And I'm sure this kid's going, but we snack together, mom. Like, I'm sure that that's what's happening in their head. So it's so interesting that you're saying that because I really think, because these are lovely, amazing people, I don't think they get it. They've associated this with age and they don't associate it with like, if I don't change this, my kids are going to grow up to have the same anxiety disease that I have. I think that's so powerful. Do you guys treat the whole family or the adults and then just tell them this for their children?
Yeah, generally speaking, we work with a lot with women and men, but primarily women. That just tends to be the demographic that's most interested in wellness
Yes.
these days.
Yes.
And, we believe that, the women really, in most cases, control the household in the sense that they're doing a lot of the shopping, they're doing a lot of the food preparation, they're stocking the pantry, so to speak. And so if we can impact them in a positive way, then the whole house gets collateral benefits. And, we do things like get them to change their light bulbs. We put grounding mats throughout their house. We get them to use non-toxic cleaning products, like air filters. So even passively, the rest of the family is going to benefit from some of the changes that the mother or the father is making. And then, we teach people how to make delicious food. So they don't have to
Mm,
make 10 different meals for 10 different
different
people.
people.
And and so it really there's a ton of collateral benefits that take place because we do prescribe supplements when necessary, but that's not the bulk of our intervention. It's mainly lifestyle and nutrition environment. So those things, as they improve in the household, everyone collaterally benefits from it.
I love that. You said two things I don't think any of my guests spoke about before: light bulbs and grounding mats. Tell us.
Yeah, absolutely. So a common misconception for people is that their primary source of energy is food. So if we look at the mitochondria, all of our calories turn into electrons. So the primary fuel system in our body is electrons, and your mitochondria don't care where the electrons came from. So about 70% of our electrons come from non-food sources. So this could include things like grounding, which is as simple as getting your bare feet on the earth or even touching a tree. It could be getting in bodies of water, which is a free source of electrons. It could be drinking more water, which is also has 0 calories but loaded with electrons. Getting more sunlight can be a powerful way. And so we use a grounding mat. I actually have one on my desk. It looks like a little giant mouse pad, and it plugs into the grounding outlet in my wall. So I have a free flow of electrons that are constantly coming into my body. Some people
Mm.
might get grounding pillows or grounding sheets. That's another way. You can get grounding sandals. So when I travel, I wear grounding sandals, which have a little copper plug on the bottom. And so I'm getting free electrons through that process as well. And then, light bulbs, chances are the light bulbs you and I used growing up were tungsten bulbs, the original Edison bulbs.
Sure.
And those bulbs actually contain red wavelengths of light, but also infrared wavelengths of light. That's what actually produces the heat in the bulb. Now, what they did to promote energy efficiency is they removed the red wavelengths of light and they removed the infrared wavelengths of light from LED bulbs and overexpress blue light. So if you look at sunlight, sunlight has a very even distribution of all wavelengths of light, including ultraviolet light and also including infrared light. In fact, 50% of the light that comes from the sun is infrared and red light. So we're missing those key wavelengths of light, which is giving information to our skin, but more importantly, to our eyes and to our brain as to what time of day it is. Light also regulates our hormones. And so if our lighting is junk or processed lighting, like it is for most people, then unfortunately, it's going to create disruption and dysfunction in the body. It's going to disrupt their circadian rhythm. It's going to disrupt their melatonin production. And melatonin, as you and some of your listeners probably know, is our most potent antioxidant. And it's also going to disrupt our sleep, which is our most potent healing modality. So anything that throws us off in that regard is going to create kind of a domino effect of issues in our body.
I love that you said processed lighting. I don't think I've ever heard that term. Processed food, processed lighting, junk light. So what's the light bulb of choice that people should go change their light bulbs to?
Yeah, so there's a company called Healthy Lighting that you can go to, and they sell full spectrum light bulbs, which are tungsten bulbs. So they have all wavelengths of light, and they're easier on the eyes. So they don't
Mm.
cause any eye strain. They don't flicker like an LED bulb flickers at 60 times per second, and that really agitates our nervous system. So that's something to
I'm
keep in
watching my
mind.
ring light flicker right now as you speak.
Yeah. So that flicker creates agitation to our nervous system. I use something called a sky portal. So the light that I'm using right now is a biophoton light, and I can change
Mm.
the color of it throughout the day. So later on, as the sun goes down, it'll turn into an orange glow. So it kind of mimics the right wavelengths of light at the right time of day. In the evening, we turn off all of our overhead lighting because the position of the directionality of the light also makes a difference. For example, most people have overhead lighting all day, even at nighttime. And that's not very natural because the only time that the sun is directly overhead is solar
Noon.
noon,
Sure.
and so their brain thinks it's daytime all day,
Say.
as opposed to understanding the kind of circadian rhythm and understanding what hormones to release at different times. So we use red bulbs in the evening. My phone turns red after a certain time of day. I have a little hack that I put on it, so I press my power button 3 times and the screen turns red. We try to get off of our screens a couple hours before bedtime, and we really try to just use the right type of you know tungsten bulbs in the evening as well. So I think a lot of it can be you can start by just there's like different layers to how you go about this, right? So if you want to be a 5 out of 5 student, you don't use any artificial light, right? So after the sun goes down, no artificial light, you go to candle lights. And then if you want to be a 4 out of 5 student, you go to red lights, right? If you want to be a 3 out of 5 student, then you can wear like blue blocker glasses, right? All your lights are still on, obviously. So there's different levels that you can take this with. However, what we found is that when we go back to our natural circadian rhythm, that's what creates the fastest shift for people.
Oh
And,
my God, I love
at
that.
our clients all get Aura rings. So we track their sleep data, and we've been doing that for years now. And, I have people calling me all the time and saying, like, my sleep sucks. What do I do? And I put them on a lights out challenge. And I say, listen, when the sun is up, you can have the lights on. And then when the sun goes down, you turn on tungsten bulbs for, as the sun is setting. And then after the sun sets, then you go to no lights, and you can go to candlelight if you want, right? Or, red bulbs if you absolutely need them, but very dim. And their sleep improves. Within days, they see radical shifts in their quality of sleep.
But how do you manage that with time, with like when it gets dark at 5? People are still at work sometimes at 5.
Yeah. Well, that's that's something that needs to shift or change for people, right? And now the days are getting longer, which is nice.
Yes, in the
Um,
summer, this is very manageable. Like, I was just wondering how you overcome it. You're like, in the winter, you just won't sleep as well.
yeah, well, here's the thing. In the winter, we actually require more sleep.
Sure, because
So,
we're dealing with so much more, but, I mean, I guess people figure
to,
it out. They do the
yeah, so
best they can.
to answer your question, like, there's ways to mitigate, right? So if you need the lights on, then you can keep them dim. You can use lamps with shades. You can use floor-based lighting instead of overhead lighting. If you need to have it bright for whatever reason, then you can wear glasses, right? You can
Yeah.
wear orange or red tinted glasses, which filter out that light. And then, just use your discretion,
Yeah.
right? It's like
Like,
you just do the best that you can and
absolutely.
mitigate where you can.
That's the mantra. Do the best you can. 5 out of 5 is great, but like a 1 out of 5 is better than 0 out of 5 too. Like, I'm sure you advocate for that too. It's like, let's start somewhere. I love that so
Yeah.
much. I don't think we've had the conversation of light on our podcast yet. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Or of grounding. I think maybe you mentioned it once, but I love the way you explained it. And I've heard of grounding sheets and pillowcases. I have them myself, but I have not explored the grounding mat on the table, which is such an easy way.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So such an easy way. I love that. For those of you who don't know what grounding is, there's a book, I think it's called Earthing.
Yep.
Pick it up. It's a really short read, and it's a game changer. So not only did you become someone who helps patients, and uh, I think like many of us, as the sicker patients come in, you learn more and more and more to help accommodate the people coming in. You also started training other providers.
Mhm.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah, sure. So, I didn't think I would, but people kept asking me, like, what are you doing? They love the content I was sharing on social media. And it really started off with my colleagues, my chiropractic colleagues who were friends with me on Facebook. And they started seeing me share like some of the case studies of the people we were helping, like, kind of like what Ron Grisanti did for me, right? He was sharing his case studies that piqued my interest. So the same thing, I started sharing what I was doing, and it piqued a lot of people's interest. And they said, hey, can you teach me this? And so I started essentially doing it, for free, just as a friendly service to my colleagues. And then my wife is like, man, this is, and then more and more people started getting in on it. And she's like, you're spending a lot of time with these folks. You sounds like you love doing it. You should turn this into something more meaningful. So then I started running a mentorship program and
Nice.
essentially learning and sharing, right? And facilitating, opportunities for other practitioners to learn from my mistakes. So I tell people, learn from my time and dime. So
Yes.
you don't have to waste your time and dime. And I'll tell you what works and what doesn't. And then we actually started creating a system. So we created a metabolic program called Living Light. And now we license that program to practitioners. So literally in a day, somebody could be up and running using our entire process in their practice with the lead generation, with the email campaigns, with the actual program itself, with the fulfillment of the kits that the clients get, with all the educational training and modules that the clients would receive. That is all installed into their account as a licensee within a day, and they're up and running. So we've kind of taken away all the friction points
Yeah.
in terms of starting a practice and building a program and, doing all the courseware and everything that's involved with it and creating world-class resources. And now we just plug it into clients' accounts. So I used to teach people how to do that. Then I would white label my systems for them. And then eventually I smartened up and said, I'm just going to license this to you because it's
Sure.
way faster to implement it.
No, that's great. A lot of people really need, they want help. They want the people are coming to them and they have an interest, providers have an interest. And some people really need that help. They don't know how to maybe put systems together. You can
Hmm.
be a phenomenal clinician and not know how to put the framework together. So that's great that you do that. And it saves time. I mean, it took me years to study and then years to figure out, how to implement it. So it's great that you tell people that time. And it's a great like starting point for people, I imagine. That is
Hmm.
so good. I love that so much. So I don't know, what is like, how would you, if someone comes to you, what do you like to start with them? Like tell our listeners, what is something that they can do, some like starter, like go home and do this.
Wow, great question. So it depends on the person. There's three areas that we focus on quite a bit because I feel like these are the things that move the needle the most. The first one is the breath. Our breath
Mm,
is a direct access point to our nervous system. And as you probably know, Dr. E, most people's nervous systems are completely dysregulated these days. And, the breath is the steering wheel of that nervous system. So by teaching people a variety of different breathing techniques and correcting dysfunctional nighttime breathing by doing something as simple as mouth taping, they start to see immediate improvement. You can go weeks without eating, or about a week without drinking any water, a couple days without sleep, but you can only go a few minutes without breathing. So that in and of itself tells us how important the process is. But breath is one of those things that I refer to as a lead domino because our breath is not only a direct access point to our nervous system, but our breath helps our circulatory system. Our immune system starts in our nose, so it plays a huge role in our immune health. Oxygenation of our tissues and mitochondria are very important in energy production and nutrient delivery. And we also have the diaphragm with its 23,000 breaths that it helps us take every day, acts as a lymphatic pump. So when we breathe nice and deeply, our lymphatic system also gets pumped properly. Our diaphragm is where we store a lot of our trauma, and our grief is where we store our lungs. So a lot of people are holding on to stuff that isn't serving them energetically and emotionally. By teaching them how to breathe correctly, we can help them course correct. So breath is the first thing we change. The second thing we want them to change is their circadian rhythm. So getting outside more at specific times during the day. It's not just about vitamin D in the winter, for example, because we just don't get enough UVB light here. We're just too far north. So it's not even about vitamin D. It's more about signaling and notifying the brain what time of day it is.
absolutely.
That process still takes place. And so circadian rhythm is number two. And the third one is sleep optimization. So if we can get people to optimize their sleep, then we're tapping into another healing modality for them. And so we teach them about sleep hygiene. So if there were three things that I had to discuss and you only gave me three things to talk about, then it would be those three things.
I so love that you started with those three things because almost everyone would say nutrition. Well, anyone in the beginning would say nutrition. And while there's no question that that's important, one of the things I discovered, and I think you have too, and any provider that has been on this podcast that has been doing this for a while, I think almost all of us started at the gut and then detox and get rid of the mold and get rid of the Lyme or whatever your detox du jour is. And then eventually you start figuring out that it's central nervous system,
Hmm.
sleep, to your point, breathing. And and then we're like, oh my God, none of this is going to work without this. And it seems to me the conclusion that anyone who's been doing this for a while gets to. If you're blessed enough to discover it when you first start out, God bless you, you're amazing. But I'm loving that you started here because everything on Instagram and social is like, oh, detox protocol and change, all important. But if you don't get your central nervous system right, absolutely nothing works. This is why you're like, well, I've tried every diet, nothing works. This is why you're still holding your breath. I've tried every diet. I've been gluten free forever. It doesn't work. When was the last time you slept?
Hmm.
Right. So when was the last time you've been outside? People don't understand that seeing the sun in the morning is going to help you fall asleep at night. And sleep is causative for dementia. Like lack of sleep is causative for dementia. So I love that you started that because it is the foundation of the pyramid. And then you could talk about gut. And then you can maybe talk about detoxing if everything else is in play. The word detox is so sexy that everyone goes there first, and it's so backwards. So like people ask me all the time, how do I know if a good provider? If they say detox on the first visit, just leave. Just leave. It's the wrong place to start. It's the end. Everything has to be in place. So I love that so much that you said that. It's so perfect. The breathing work is, I don't think anyone's discussed that specifically around breathing. We talk a lot about vagus nerve work and central nervous system work and limbic system retraining. But the breath work is kind of like, so it's such a simple, easy way. You could do it anytime. You don't need any devices.
Mhm.
Just learn how to breathe right. That's amazing. Do you have like a quick tip for someone? I don't know
Yeah.
whether to either how to figure out how they are not breathing right or how to breathe right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, really, really simple, high level stuff for people to note is that we take 23,000 breaths a day. We consume about 30 pounds of oxygen or air a day, which means we consume more air in a day than food we do in a week. And it's the way we interact with our outside environment more so than nutrition.
Powerful.
70% of detox takes place through the lungs, right? We detox and offload carbon dioxide, which is an important signaling molecule. Our urge to breathe comes from a low tolerance to CO2, not a desire for more oxygen. With every breath we take, we only dump about 20% of the oxygen to the tissue, and the rest of it we actually breathe out. So you actually have about 5 breaths in every breath that you take. The more you, the slower you breathe, the more you actually deliver oxygen to the tissue. It's kind of paradoxical. So, slower breathing actually increases tissue oxygenation because as we increase CO2 levels, we tap into something called the Bohr effect, where there's greater oxygen delivered to the cells. When this happens, we are able to actually perform better, recover better, all that good stuff. Now, if somebody were to ask me how to breathe, there's a breath for every activity. So if you're going for a
Mm.
run, there's a breathing technique. If you're going to lift heavy weights, there's a breathing technique. If you're going to sit and check emails, there's a breathing technique. If you want to try to fall asleep, there's a breathing technique. So you really have to understand that your breath should match your activity. And because your breath is like the steering wheel of your nervous system, we're essentially matching the state of our nervous system with the way that we're breathing. And so it's a two-way street. Our nervous system, without our awareness even, uses the breath to regulate itself. So for example, if we're trying to release a lot of emotion, we start crying. Crying is a form of breath work. If something is funny, we start laughing. Laughing is a form of breath work. If we feel a sense of relief, that that sigh that we let out, that's a form of breath work. If we gasp and hold our breath, that's also a form of breath work. That puts us into an instant fight or flight state. So if we just pay attention to the cues, we realize that this is a two-way street, which means that I can breathe in a specific way to induce a specific response in my body.
Fascinating.
And so what's really cool about this is once people learn this, then they realize that I'm in so much more control than I was led to believe and ever thought I was. And how could it be so darn simple? Well, the reality is that's what we're looking for, right? We're
Yeah, we
looking
want
for
simple.
the zenith of both simplicity and sophistication, and that's what the breath is. And so as I started going down this rabbit hole, I started realizing that, our diaphragm, for example, not only is referred to as the second heart because it helps pump our heart. As our lungs expand and contract, it's assisting our heart in pumping blood. As our diaphragm moves up and down, it's pumping the biggest lymph nodes in our body just underneath it. And also our myofascial matrix, our myofascial tissue, uh, pressure in that myofascial tissue is maintained by the diaphragm. So this is why a lot of trauma is stored in the diaphragm, because if somebody is in a car accident or bracing for impact, guess what? They hold their breath, because when they hold their breath, their diaphragm stays still and it evenly distributes the force throughout the body. And of course, it makes sense that that muscle is right in the middle because that allows for equal force distribution. So it plays a very, very important role, those three areas of our health. But if you want to know how to breathe in the majority of instances, then we want to shift to something called nasal breathing. And
Mm.
correct nasal breathing is when our tongue is at the roof of our mouth. Okay. So the tip of our tongue should be just behind our front two teeth.
I'm practicing it as you're saying it. Okay.
And then just lay it across your mouth. And that's going to put your tongue and jaw in a relaxed position. There's a magic button just behind your front two teeth that instantly relaxes your nervous system. It's like closing a circuit. This is why children suck their thumb to soothe themselves. This is why they use pacifiers to soothe themselves, because it touches just behind their front two teeth and instantly soothes them. This is why a mother's nipple instantly soothes a child, because of the little magic button that it pushes. Now, people who are habitual mouth breathers will not have that tongue in the right position, because if you put your tongue in the right position, you can't breathe through your mouth anymore. It almost seals your mouth. So when people are mouth breathers, what happens is their tongue sits lower in their mouth, and that actually changes the structure of the airway. So
Mm.
your tongue actually acts as a spacer. It pushes your hard palate outwards and forwards, creating a nice open patent airway. When the tongue sits low in the mouth, then the face collapses inwards. So you'll see this in children. Children who are habitual mouth breathers will have small, narrow airways, be more prone to sinus infections, more prone to asthma, more prone to tonsillitis, because they're habitually mouth breathing. Now, about 50% of adults habitually mouth breathe during the day, and 66% of adults habitually mouth breathe at night. So there's an immediate opportunity to improve breathing for most people just by closing their mouth, putting their tongue in the roof of their mouth, and breathing in and out through their nose. Now, the cadence of that breath should be between 4 and 6 seconds in and 4 and 6 seconds out. If you want to calibrate what that is precisely for you, you can use something called Inner Balance, which is a device made by HeartMath Institute. And you
Mm.
just a little device that clips to your ear, and it'll tell you what breathing pattern puts you in the highest state of coherence. And coherence means that our heart and our brain are connected to one another. And that's the state we want to be in for our highest forms of expression, creativity, problem solving, empathy, compassion. Those emotional states and that presence comes from being in a state of coherence. So, slow breathing, 4 to 6 seconds in, 4 to 6 seconds out, puts us in a state of coherence, increases oxygenation to the brain, and relaxes our nervous system and puts us in a more parasympathetic state. And it's in that parasympathetic state that we heal every cell, tissue, and organ simultaneously. Now, somebody who's wanting to then, so there's three different gears to breathing. So, in and out through the nose. Then there's
Mhm.
in through the nose, out through the mouth with mild exertion. And then there's in and out through the mouth rapidly, right? For strenuous activities or sprinting or something like that, because
Sure.
I want to use my lungs and my diaphragm to really pump my heart, because they're going to assist the heart in pumping blood. If I'm going for a sprint and I stop breathing, for example, or breathe really slow, then I'm not using the mechanical forces that my breath allow me to help my heart in pumping that blood. So it's really all about understanding what state you want to be in, and then understanding how to breathe to create that state in your body.
Love that. That was such a great intro, and I love the idea that we exchange more air than and interact with the external world more than with food. That's a fascinating way of thinking about it. It raises the importance so much. We're so focused on food. We should be, but once again, reprioritizing things for us. I love that.
Our nose eats more than our mouth,
Our nose eats
right? It
more than
eats
mouth.
more
Oh, I
air.
love that so
And
much. Or it should anyway, unless we're mouth breathers, then we're not.
yeah. And some interesting facts like that can be helpful for people, clinical pearls for our colleagues, is the number one cause of cavities is mouth breathing, because it
Mm.
dries out the saliva, and you know, inflammation and periodontal disease and things like that occur when people are habitual mouth breathers. When we breathe through our mouth, we kill the bacteria that's responsible for producing nitric oxide. Nitric oxide, as many people might know, is antipathogenic, antiviral, antibacterial. So our nasal mucosa produces nitric oxide in the presence of the right bacteria in our mouth. This is why using mouthwash is terrible for people, because it kills that healthy bacteria. And mouthwash and high blood pressure are very closely connected.
What, you
Nitric
mean something
oxide,
that they sold us every day to use is unnecessary? I can't imagine.
right? So nitric oxide helps with microcirculation. It helps with as an initial immune defense against the outside world, and it also helps with regulating blood pressure.
For
When
sure.
we breathe through our nose, we pressurize the air, we moisture regulate the air, we temperature regulate the air. We essentially perfect the air before it goes into our lung, which also has its own microbiome. When we breathe through our mouth, which is the dirtiest part of our body, according to any microbiologist you'll speak to, we're actually creating toxic air that's now going into our lungs and activating our immune system constantly throughout the day with those 23,000 breaths that people are taking. So just that simple act of breathing through our nose, takes so much pressure off the nervous system, off the immune system, off the microbiome, and so many other areas of our health.
Love this. So good. So good. Any last minute words you want to give our shared listeners?
Well, I mean, I think that there's so much opportunity for us to be in service right now. I would say the more you can keep your practice simple, the more people
Yes.
you'll be able to help. There's a time and place for bespoke care, which is what you do and what I do. It's just a matter of kind of flipping the pyramid. So it used to be for us, it would be 80% functional medicine, 20% lifestyle. And now it's the opposite. It's
Yes.
80% lifestyle and 20% functional medicine.
So
And,
true.
everyone needs a strong base to start with. So get the things in the home right, environment right, mindset right. you know, Trauma is something that's often overlooked that needs to be addressed. And a lot of that trauma and grief is stored in the
Storage.
lungs and diaphragm. So really teaching people how to release that through, specific breathing techniques can be helpful. And simplicity is the greatest and ultimate sophistication, as Da Vinci said. So how do we keep our practices, protocols, and processes simple? So simple that somebody could go home and explain it to someone they love and
Yes.
care about.
Yes. I 100%, I wholeheartedly agree. Simpler the better. And just as it takes like a savvier provider, it also takes a savvier client who's maybe been through it and tried it and is like, okay, I'm willing to listen now to more. So there's a development and readiness as well, which is fine. There's a pot for every lid for every pot. So how do people reach you if they want to work with you? I mean, we're going to put your links in, but tell us, do you still take on clients like one-on-one?
Yep. So that'll be that's a smaller part of what I do now. I have a team that works with clients, but people can still work with me if there's room in my calendar. They can go to becomeproof.com to learn a little bit more about what we do. And then if they want to learn more about our licensing programs or they want to work with us individually, they can find me on Facebook and shoot me a quick message. And we can definitely set up a time to meet with them and teach them more about what we do.
I love that. There's so many providers who need your help. This is great because the more providers out there, the more people we can help. Sachin Patel, I cannot thank you enough. You taught us so many things. This is such a great podcast, new topics that we haven't explored. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for hosting me.
Of course. Thank you for tuning into the Medical Disruptor. If today's conversation resonated with you and you're ready to dig deeper, my book is the perfect place to start. You can find it on my website, drefratlamondre.com/book. And if you want more, you can find a whole bunch of free videos on the same website, drefratlamondre.com/courses. If you're interested in working with me one-on-one, please apply to my waiting list, also found there. And if you're a nurse practitioner looking for courses to level up your clinical confidence, visit my website at egprep.com. Don't forget to subscribe, share this episode, and leave a review. It helps us reach so many more disruptors like you. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, keep disrupting.